on his bar mitzvah tonight, and he should grow up to be a Talmid Chacham and a Yerushalayim. We are sponsored by A.B. Spry. We are sponsored by Michal Avram Chavin. We welcome in on this wonderful evening Berish Gesserman, Irving Fishbaum, Saba, Dr. Block, Mel Zachter, Mo Kushner, Stephen Holtzman, Menachem Yamansky, Aaron Swade, Shalom Fogel, Yitzi Fuchs, thank you very much, Avram Rezepkowitz, Ilya Shutman, Rabbi Kranz, Naftali Jablin. We have here in the shul Reb Kramer and Rich Lenner and Michal Avram and Ruvain Shanet, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Okay, and we welcome in David Helfkat. We are holding at the new Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Yud Amud Beis, and here comes Eddie Chazan. I think maybe Shimon Deer. Eddie Chazan, and who is that? That's Eddie, and I don't know who the next person is. So we're holding at the new Mishnah on Kuf Yud Amud Beis. Hamekabel Soda Mechaveiroi L'Shvua. If, let's say, Irving leases a field for me for a Shemitah period, L'Shvua Echad, for one Shemitah period, and we make it up that he's leasing it up for Sheva Meya Zuz, 700 Zuz. He gets 6 years of crops, as Shvius Min Aminyan, because when he says a Shemitah period, that includes the Shvius year, even though he can't work it during the Shvius year. However, Kibla Imenu Sheva Shonim B'Sheva Me'ezuz, but if he says, Rabbi Weiss, I'm leasing 7 years for $700, then I can't give him a Shemitah year, then I have to give him 7 crop years, Eina Shvius Min Aminyan, then the Shemitah is not counted. Now, today's blot is going to be speaking mostly about the serious crime of not paying a worker on time. Now, a day worker who finishes at night has to be paid by the next morning. A night worker has to be paid by Shkia of the next day. And that's what the Mishnah tells us now. Socher Yom, a person that's hired, if I hire Steve, then Goiva Kol Halayla. Then if he worked for me in the day, he could collect the whole night. If I don't pay him by nighttime, if I don't pay him by dawn, I'm over the halacha of Lo Yison Pulas Sacher Itcha Ad Boker. Schir Laila, if he worked for me in the night, then Goiva Kol Hayom. Then b'yoymei titein scharai, I have to give him his money that day, and I have to make sure to give it to him by shkia. Schir shois, if he works for me for several hours. So the Gemara will tell us one shot. It's a machlokes how to learn this. But goyva kol halayla v'kol hayom. This is said litstudin. This is said if he worked for me some hours in the night, then I have to pay him by the end of the night. If he worked for me a few hours during the day, I have to pay him by the end of the day. Schir Shabbos, Schir Chodesh, Schir Shana. If I hired him for a week, if I hired him for a month, if I hired him for a year, Schir Shvua, if I hired him for 7 years, Yotze B'Yom, if he finished working that day, as we welcome in also Abe Arbach here, coming in, if he worked for me, if he finishes in the day, then Goiva Kol if he finishes in the day, Goiva Kol Hayom. I have to pay him by the end of the day. Yotze B'Layla, if he finishes in the night, so since the day comes after the night, I get that whole day. Goiva Kol Halayla v'Kol Hayom, I could pay him the rest of the night and the next day. And we're going to talk a lot about this. Tan Rabbanan. Menayin l'schir yom. How do I know that if I hired Steve for the day, shegoiva kol halayla, that I have to pay him the entire night. Talmud loy son pulsit sacher itcha ad boker. You shouldn't let it lay over the payment for the work until the morning. So since I have to pay him, he finished working in the day, and ein l'schiris mishtalemes ela l'b'seif, so I have to pay him at the end of the day, so I have that night to pay him. U'menayin l'schir laila, if he worked in the night, shegoiva kol hayom, that he could collect the entire day, I have the whole day to pay him. Shenemar b'yom titein schara, in its day, when he finished in the night, that next day I have to pay him before nightfall. Says the Gemara, ve'ema ipcha, maybe say the other way around. So the Gemara says you can't say it the other way around because schiras eina mishtalemes ela b'seif. It becomes due at the end. So the night worker becomes due at the end of the night. So then I have the whole next day to pay him. The day worker, it becomes due that night. So I have the whole night to pay him when it says lo yisalem pul satcha itcha ad boker, and I can't keep it past dawn. Now. Tarabban. Now here the Gemara says it seems to be an extra word over here, extra two words. Lo yisalem means don't leave it overnight. So since it says lo yisalem pula sacher itcha, since it says you should not carry over the work of the wage of the worker, that means you shouldn't keep it until the morning. So obviously I know it means until the morning. I know that it means that I can't keep it until the morning. That's coming to tell me that if Steve worked for me and I didn't pay him the first night, so then I'm over the lav of Leisalim Pul Sacher Itcha Ad Boker, but then if I don't pay him the next day, I'm not over the lav again. I'm only over Ad Boker. That's what we learn out. I'm over the lav one time. But what if I delay and I don't pay him for a week? I'm a Rav. So Rav says, then over mishum bal tasha. Then I'm over the rabbinical law of not to delay paying. I'm a Rav Yosef Mikra. Where do we see this rabbinical law? Al toimer l'reyecha lech. Don't tell your friend go v'shuv and come back u'mocher etein, and I'll give it to you tomorrow. Don't say that when v'yesh itcha. When you have v'yesh itach, when you have the money, don't push it off. Some people, they just don't like to pay their bills. They like to keep the money a little bit more by them. They got sticky hands. So the Gemara says that it's not biblical because this is a pasuk in Mishlei, but it is rabbinical. Don't delay. Tan Rabbanan, if you're just joining us, 2 lines from the bottom of Daf Kuf Yud Amid Beis, Tan Rabbanan. Excuse me. If I tell Mel's a good friend, say Skarli Ployalim, Mel, go and hire for me some workers. I need some workers to do a job. And he goes and hires Steve. In this case, if Steve is not paid on time, neither of us transgress the law of delaying the payment of a wage earner. I'm not over because I didn't hire them. And Mel is not over. Mel isn't over either. Mel isn't over because Steve didn't do work by him. So the Gemara says, oh, wait a second. Let's clarify this. If Mel hired Steve and said, look, Mel said, I commit to pay you, then then since he's responsible to pay, if he doesn't pay, he's going to be over the lav. The Tanya, if Mel hired workers to work by him, and then and instead showed him my property and said, do work by the Rav, Mel has to pay him because Mel hired him, and then he'll go and ask me, Rabbi Weiss, reimburse me because the guy worked by you. But the bottom line is, if Mel has to pay, then Mel is going to be over the lav. Says, oh, what Mel did is he hired Steve, and he said, Rabbi Weiss is responsible to pay you. But since I didn't hire him, therefore I'm not over in the lav. And Mel, since the work wasn't done by him, Mel isn't over the lav. And this is a loophole in order to get around if a person is worried that they might not be able to pay right away. Indeed, Yehuda B'Maremer, Amalei L'Shamei, Yehuda B'Maremer said to his attendant, Zil Agali Poyalim, go and hire me workers, ve'emalahu, and tell them, Scharchem al Balabayis, that you'll be paid by Yehuda B'Maremer. This gets around the problem of not having to pay right away. Indeed, Maremer or Marzutra, Aglei Lahadodi. Maremer or Marzutra, when they had to hire workers, they hired one for the other. This is a very serious thing. People don't understand that when a babysitter comes to the house and does work for them, we'll see with the proviso that the babysitter asks, pay me, you better pay the babysitter. Because if you don't pay the babysitter and you leave it over, you could be very likely over this lav. There's a famous story about this, that the Stipler Gain, the Stipler Rav, when he was already a very old man, was seen walking through the streets one day. And, people were shocked. He wasn't really up to it. He was walking with a cane. He was walking slowly. It turns out that somebody wrote some pages for him for his Kehelis Yaakov, and he wanted to make sure that he paid him before nightfall. It's really a serious business. Amar Rabba Barafuna, and we want to wish Eddie a hearty appetite. Eating cuisine, we don't know. He might be in Bangkok, for all we know, eating Indian food. I don't know if it's cuisine. Yeah, you should see him. He's sitting with greenery in back of him. I don't know. Oh, he's in Orlando. I should have known. He should have. Why is this so strong? I mean, why? You see, Yiddishkeit realizes that a person, his work is his life. You're spending your hours. So we have to value another person's life. By the way, that's why it's called livelihood. And it says in the Gemara, Amar Rabba Barafuna, Hani Shukoi de Surah, the market men of Surah, Loi Avrei Mishum Bal Salan. If they don't pay their workers right away, they're not over Bal Talan. Why? Because it's known the workers work with the knowledge that they won't get paid until market day. They won't get paid until market day. Now, therefore, when market day comes and they're not paid, they're not over because it's not the day anymore. However, if market day passes and they're not paid, if market day passed and they're not paid, then they're over the rabbinical law of not delaying. Now, Sochir Shoy Goiva Kol Halayla V'Kol Hayom. Now, what does that mean? If you're hired for an hours, you could collect the night and the whole day. What does that mean? Is it the night? Is it the day? So Rav says we have to break this up and read it. Sochir Shoy the Yom. If, let's say, I hired Steve for a few hours that on Monday, Goiva Kol Hayom, then I have to pay him by the end of the day, Monday. Sochir Shoy the Laila. If I hired him for a few hours Monday night, Goiva Kol Halayla, then I have to pay him by the end of the night. Now Shmuel says not that way. Shmuel says, Sochir Shoyis Tiyayim. If I hired him for a few hours on Monday, I have to pay him by the end of the day, Monday. Goiva Kalayim. However, v'sachar shoyis delayla, if I hired him Monday night for a few hours, I have the rest of Tuesday to pay, because Monday night is already Tuesday. So I have a rest of Tuesday to pay, so I have that night and the next day. Goiva Kalayla v'chalayim. So now the Gemara seems to say that the Mishnah could read only like Shmuel. Tanan, Sachar Shoyis Goiva Kalayla v'chalayim. So that sounds like if I hired Steve for a few hours in the night, I could pay him the whole night and the next day. So that's like Shmuel and Tiyufta the Rav, a refutation of Rav. So as I translated when I learned the Mishnah, Amalach Rav Litstadin Ketani. No, we learn it and we break it up. Sachar Shoyis Diyayim, if I hired Steve for a few hours in the day, Goiva Kalayim. Sachar Shoyis Delayla, if I hired him for a few hours in the night, Goiva Kalayim. However, the Gemara wants to bring a raya from the end of the Mishnah. Tanan, we learned in the end of the Mishnah, Sachar Shabbos, if Steve was hired for a week, Sachar Chodesh a month, Sachar Shana a year, Sachar Shvua 7 years, Yaitze b'yayim, if he goes out in the day, Goiva Kalayim, Yaitze b'layla, if he goes out in the night, Goiva Kalayla v'Kalayim. So again, that's like Shmuel, that you get the rest of the night and the next day because it's all Tuesday. Amalach Rav, so Rav capitulates and says, you're right. That would be a proof to Shmuel. But Tanoihi, this question is actually a machlokes Tanoi. The Tanya, Sachar Shoyis Diyayim, if Steve is hired for a few hours during the day, Goiva Kalayim. He collects the whole day. Sachar Shoyis Delayla, if he's hired for a few hours in the night, Goiva Kalayim. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So that's like Rav. Reb Shimon Aimer, Sachar Shoyis Diyayim, Goiva Kalayim. If he's hired for a few hours in the day, he gets till the end of the day. Sachar Shoyis Delayla, if he's hired for a few hours in the night, Goiva Kalayla v'Chalayim, because the rest of Tuesday. So that is like the opinion of Shmuel. Now, Mikan Amru, now we're talking about the severity of this sin, and it really is severe.
Rabbi?
Yes.
The difference if I say hiring me some workers versus hiring me Joe and Steve?
No difference. Mikan Amru, from this we say, Kol HaKovesh Schar Sachir. If somebody withholds paying a worker, Oiver Behei Shemis, he transgresses 5 different lavim in the Torah. And that's really, really serious stuff. And Va'aseh, and 1 positive commandment. What are the 5? What are the 5 lavin? What are the 5 lavin? So says the Gemara, he's over mishum bal tashoik es re'echa. Do not hold back from your friend, from paying him. Or mishum bal tigza, because if you don't pay him, you're stealing from him. Or mishum bal tashik socher ani, don't hold back from a poor laborer. Or mishum bal tolan, don't allow it to be with you overnight. Or mishum b'yayimai titein scharai, and because of you should pay him in his day. That's the asay. Or mishum lo yisavoy alav hashemesh, that the sun shouldn't set before you pay him. So the Gemara says, yeah, but not one person is over all 5, because the lav of lo savo alav hashemesh is when he's a night worker, and the lav of lo salim pulash sacher ad boiker, that's a day worker. So hanidi could be a mama leka b'layla, the ika b'layla leka be a mama. The lav that's for a day worker is not for a night worker. The lav for a night worker is not for a day worker. So the Gemara says you're right. But what we mean is, Amar Rav Chisda, Shem Schiris Ba'alma. We mean that about this subject of keeping wages of a worker, we have in totality 5 lavin and 1 asay. So now the Gemara this is a little bit of a technical Gemara. Eizohu oishik ve'ezo gezel. What does it mean to retain from paying a worker, and what does it mean stealing from him? So Amar Rav Chisda, if I tell Steve, leich v'shuv, go and come back, I keep on pushing him off. He keeps on coming for his money, and I say, leich v'shuv, go and come back. Leich v'shuv, zeu oishik, that's holding back. Yesh lecha biyadi, I have your money, be'eni noisen lech. You know, it's ikvus in the Mashiach, chutz b'yaska. I tell him, I have your money, but I ain't paying. Zeu gezel, that's theft. Maskalo Rav Sheshes. So Rav Sheshes says, I don't agree with Rav Chisda's interpretation of retention. Because when I tell Steve, go and come back, I'm never telling him that I'm not going to pay him. Maskalo Rav Sheshes, Ezo Oishik Shechayv Olav Torah Carbon, when it says that when somebody swears falsely, one of the things they swears falsely about is not paying a worker. So it has to be dumya de pigodin. It has to be similar to swearing about a deposit. And by deposit, it's talking about the kakafalei mamayna, that I deny having the deposit. So when it says Ashik, it also must mean that I deny having to pay Steve. The definition of Rav Chisda of leich v'shuv, I'm not denying anything. I just am procrastinating. I'm just pushing it off. Ela Amar Rav Sheshes, I'll tell you what Ashik is. Nisativ lach, if I tell Steve I paid you already, that's retention. That's Ashik. Yesh lecha biyadi v'eini noisen lach, I owe you the money, but I'm not paying you. Zeu gezel, that's theft. Says the Gemara, no. Maska of Ayazu gezel shchayav of Torah carbon. What kind of gezel does the Torah say you're chayav a carbon if you swear falsely about? Dumya de pekadin bay, then there has to be like a deposit to kakafalei mamayna. So it can't be where I say I owe you the money and I'm not paying, because that's not a denial. Ela Amar Abaya, this is what Ashik and gezel is. Ela Amar Abaya lo yisacharticha me'olam. If I tell Steve, I never hide you, I don't know you. I don't know you from Adams. That's Zeu Oishik. That's retaining. Nisatavlach, if I tell him I gave it to you already, which is also denial of owing him money, Zeu Gezel. That's Gezel. So now the Gemara asks one more technical question over here. Gemara says when Rav Sheshes, when Rav Chisda originally said that Ashik is where I tell him to keep coming back, and Gezel is where I tell him, I'm not paying you. So Rav Sheshes only had a kasha on Rav Chisda's translation of Ashik, because he says if I keep on telling him to come back, that's not a denial of money. So it's not similar to Pikadon. But he didn't have a problem of Rav Chisda's definition of that I have it, but I'm not paying you. But why? If I say I have it and I'm not paying you, that's also not a denial of owing him the money. So Rav Sheshes should have a kasha on Rav Chisda on his definition of Gezel too. Or Rav Sheshes Maishna Oishik to Kashalei. Why was the translation of retaining difficult for him? Maishna Gezel Dolei Kashalei. But theft wasn't bothersome. But why? Theft is also bothersome, because if he translates theft that I say I have it, but I'm not paying you, I owe you the money, but I'm not paying you, that's also not a denial. So Amalach, so Rav Sheshes says, no, the case of Gezel, I could say that Rav Chisda meant Gazel de Gazle, that initially he told him, I owe it to you, but I'm not paying. But then when he got to the court, he denied it, under Kafra, he denied it, and he swore falsely. So the Gemara says, so you can learn that way with Oishik too. You said that it means go and I tell Steve go and I'll pay you. Come back, come back. And when we came to court, then I denied it. Says the Gemara, the Hadar Kafre. And I was telling him go and come back. But when we got to court, I denied it and swore. So the Gemara says no, and this is a grammatical pshat. Haki hashta. What's the comparison? Bishlayma Hasam, in the case of Gezel, it says Ksiv Oy Begazel, or in a matter of robbery. So that means that when he came to court, he swore about robbery. Michlal the oidolei meikar. Initially, he admitted. Initially, I admitted. I just said I wasn't paying. Aval gabe oishik miksiv o ba'ushek o oshaksiv. In the past, that already in the past I was telling him that I was denying it. Sha'oshku kfar. So therefore, it can't be the way Rav Chisda learns that it meant that I said leich v'shuv, go, leave and come back, because then I wasn't denying it. Rava disagrees with this. Rava says you don't have to learn that oishik and gezel have different definitions. Zel oishik, zel gezel. Oishik and gezel are one and the same, withholding somebody's wages. V'lama chilkin akasav. Why does the pasuk say it two different ways? Lav or lav b'shnei lavin, to tell him that you're even more lavin. The Torah says certain things, as Ruvain pointed out, certain things are so heinous that there's a lot of lavin. Now, says the Mishnah. I'm a little bit under time pressure, Rabbi said, because they want me back at the Simcha, but whether I'll get back there or not is to be seen. Well, I have to. My wife is there without a car, but yeah, but no. I want to be in both places. I want to be here with you, my kviyas, my purpose, but I also want to be with my family. So it's my new family. Now, geniuses over here. They're geniuses. These people. Now. Now, this of withholding wages, that it's prohibited, it's true whether you hire a person, or you hired an animal, or you hired a automobile. There is the mitzvah to pay on the day on time. Don't keep the wages until dawn. Amosai, but this kicks in only, like I told you before, bisman shetvoi, when they ask for the money. Loitvoi, but if they don't ask for the money, ain't over alav. Himcho eitzel chenvini eitzel shulchani. If I send, if I send my worker to, I made up that he should get his payment by the grocer. I'm paying him in goods. I eitzel shulchani, or I sent him to a money changer to get cash, and they don't pay him right away, then ain't over love. I'm not over because I did my due diligence. I made the arrangement, and therefore, then I am not over. Socher bizmanai. Now here, this is another angle of this, and that is if a person was finished working at the end of the night, he has to be paid the next day. During that day, if he says that he wasn't paid, then he could swear and he gets paid. Socher bizmanai nishpa v'noitel. Over zmanai. But if the day already passed, and now he claims that he didn't get paid, then eino nishpa v'noitel. Then he can't swear and collect. However, im yesh edim shetvoi, if there's witnesses that he asked during the day and he didn't get paid, then how is that nishpa v'noitel? Then the next day he could still swear and collect. Ger Toshiv. Now this is called the resident alien. It's a machlokes if ger toshiv is a ger that committed just to keep the 7 Noahide laws, a Noahide, or it's just someone who committed not to worship idolatry. But either way, ger toshiv, yesh by mishum b'yamei titein schara. There is the mitzvahs say to pay him on time, but ve'ein by mishum lo yisalim pulasachar itchad biker. But if he worked in the day, there's no lav not to pay him if you didn't pay him by dawn. Now, the Mishnah says a lot of things. So we're going to have to pinpoint who's the author of our Mishnah. Mani Masnisen, who's the authorship of the Mishnah? Loi Tanakama, it's not the Tanakama of the pasuk of Achecha. The pasuk says, Loi Sashich Sacher Ani ve'Evyain. You shouldn't withhold the sacher of an ani or one who is destitute. Me Achecha, from your brother. Oy migercha, or from the convert. Asher ba'artzecha, in your land. Bisharecha, in your gate. So the pasuk says a lot of words over there. So we're going to make a lot of drushes from these words. So it says the Gemara, Mani masnisen, like Tanakama de miachecha. It's not the Tanakama that dashens the pasuk of Achecha, v'lo Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, and it's not Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Mahi, what are we referring to over here? The Tanya, it says you shouldn't withhold it me'achecha from your brother, prat la'cherim. That excludes goyim. That excludes idolaters. Gercha, zeger tzedek. That includes a righteous convert. Bisharecha, that includes ze'oichel nevelis. That includes even a resident alien who just eats nevelis but keeps the 7 Noahide laws, or he doesn't worship idolatry. Ainli ala sachar adam. I only know if you hired a man. Minayin l'rabas behema v'kelim. How do I know to include animal and utensils too? Talmud loimer ba'artzecha, kol she'ba'artzecha. All that which is in your land, even whether you rent a human, an animal, or a car. V'kulan oivrin v'kol hashemus halalu. And you're over all these lavin. V'kan amru, from here we say, echad sachar adam, echad sachar behema, v'echad sachar kelim, whether you hired a man, an animal, or utensils, yesh by mishum b'yom etitein schara, v'yesh by mishum bal tolim pula sachar. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says, Ger Taishev, a resident alien, yesh by mishum b'yom etitein schara. You're over the mitzvahs I say to pay him on time, ve'ein by mishum lo yisalim behema, and behema v'kelim, animals and utensils, ein bahem ela mishum bal tashik bilvad. There's only an isser of retaining. So money. Who's the authorship of the Mishnah? Itana kama de me'achecha kasha ger toishiv, because the Tanakama says that by a ger toishiv you're over both b'yom etitein schara and loisalin, while our Mishnah says that by a ger toishiv you're only over b'yom etitein. Rabbi Yosi, and if it's going according to Rabbi Yosi, kasha behema v'kelim. Our Mishnah says that by behema and kelim, by animals and utensils, you're over all of the lavin, and Rabbi Yosi says you're only over the lav of lo yisajik. Amar Rava, so he says you're right. The authorship of our Mishnah is not like the Tanakama, and it's not like Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Rather, it's a Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael. Amar Rava, Hai Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmaeli. It's a Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael. The Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, for they taught in the Academy of Rabbi Yishmael, Echad Sachar Adam, whether I hire a man, Ve'echad Sachar Behema, or I hire an animal, Ve'echad Sachar Kelim, or I hire utensils, I hire a car or a vacuum cleaner. Yesh by mishum b'yom etitein schara yom mishum lo yisalin pulas chasachar etchad biker. So you have everything like our Mishnah says, but a ger toishiv, a resident alien, whether it means that he just committed not to worship idolatry or the 7 Noahide laws, yesh by mishum b'yom etitein schara, but the aim by mishum bal salam. So now we're going to get to the reasons of the different opinions. So now, my timer the Tanakama de Me'achecha. What's the reason that the Tanakama Me'achecha holds that the Isurim are by everything? Here where it says Bisharecha, that adds even a resident alien, and that only says in the Parsha B'yom Etitein Scharai. How do you know that it applies also to the lav of Leisalin? Gomer Sacher Sacher. He darshins Gzeir Shava Sacher Sacher. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Loi Gomer Sacher Sacher. So the Gemara says, well, Nehei the Loi Gomer Sacher Sacher. Behema, the Kalim, why does he say that Behema and Kalim is only over with Baal Tashaik? It should also be over Yoimei Tita in Scharai. Behema and Kalim, it shouldn't be Yoimei Tita in Scharai. Nami Nechayev. Says the Gemara, Tani Rab Chananya Amakra, the pasuk says, V'loi Savoy Olav Hashemesh, the sun shouldn't set before you pay, Ki Anihu. He holds it's only by something that has Anias and Ashiras. Utensils and animals don't have Anias and Ashiras. Mishain Bon Lidei Anias Vashiras. Yotze behema v'kelim, an animal and utensil, shein bundle l'dei aniyas v'ashiras. They're not things that have poverty and wealth. So the Tanakama, what does he do with the pasuk of ki anihu? The Tanakama, hi ki anihu, my avidle. What does he do with ki anihu? He uses it lahaktim ani la'ashir. To tell you the halacha that if you have two people to pay, then you should pay the ani first. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, he learns that out because the pasuk highlights that you shouldn't retain the wage of a poor and destitute person. So you see, it puts poor person first. The Tanakama says, I need the pasuk of ani, ki anihu, and I also need ani ve'evyon. You have to know that an evyon is more destitute than an ani. An ani is a poor person. An evyon has nothing. He's walking around hungry. Chad lahaktim ani la'asher. One comes to tell you that you pay an ani before the wealthy person, and surprisingly, the chad lahaktim ani la'evyon, that you pay the poor person before the destitute person. Why? Because we're not worried that the destitute person isn't going to ask you. The poor person and the wealthy person might be embarrassed to ask to be paid. But the wealthy person is not going to be, the destitute person is not going to be embarrassed. So pay the poor person before the destitute person, because the poor person might be ashamed to ask, but the destitute person, he's going to ask. So pay the poor person first. V'tzricha, we need them all. If it would tell us the poor person, so therefore, since he's not embarrassed to ask, so that's why you pay the poor person before the evyon. But the rich person who is embarrassed to ask, he has money, he's embarrassed to ask, I might think you don't pay the poor person first. That's because Mishum Delay Tzarech, he doesn't need. But a destitute person that needs it, I might think that you should give him first. Tzricha, that you give the ani first. The Tanam done. Now the problem is our Tana, if he holds up sacher, the Tani done manavshach, of sacher, then afilu ger toishev nami. Then even the ger toishev should have even if he learns sacher, then even the ger toishev should have also the lav of loy salam pula sacher itka. Loyal of sacher, then behema v'kelim minale. How does he know the other lavin apply to behema and kelim? Say it only applies by the parsha where it says b'sharecha, ba'artzecha, kol sheba'artzecha. La'olam loyal of sacher. V'shani hasam, but it's different. The amakra. V'loi salim pula sacher itcha ad boker. Now it says you shouldn't leave the wage of the sacher with you until the morning, and it says the word, it could have said loisalin sacher. Why does it say pa'ulas sacher? Anything that works for you. Whether it's an animal, whether it's an automobile. Kol she'pulasa yitcha. Says the Gemara, Yachi afilu ger toishav nami. So then we should include a ger toishav also. He's also working with you. Says the Gemara, makra reyacha. Over there it says reyacha. Reyacha comes to exclude. Reyacha means reyacha b'mitzvahs. Not a resident alien. That's not reyacha b'mitzvahs. Reyacha v'lo ger toishav. Says the Gemara, so reyacha should also exclude an animal and utensils. Yachi afilu behema v'kelim nami. So the Gemara says no, but it says hoksiv pulas sacher itcha. Anyone that works with you. So ma rois l'rabbis behema v'kelim. Why do we include animals and utensils ulahoitzi ger toishav and exclude the resident alien? So the Gemara says mistavra behema v'kelim havalei l'rabbis. Why? Because that's at least the money of reyecha. It fits in reyecha. It's the money of reyecha. It's the money of a Jew that keeps the mitzvahs. Shekain yeshnan b'chlal mammon reyecha. While ger toishav, the resident alien, ain't b'chlal mammon reyecha. So what is the Tana Kama? The Tana Kama de me'achecha, hi reyecha my avdilei. What does he do with reyecha? That's coming to tell you how mabayle l'kedesanya reyecha v'lei amaleki, and not an idolater like an amaleki. So the Gemara says, but amaleki we know to exclude from the fact that it says ochicha prat le'acherim. Says the Gemara, but amaleki me'achicha nafka. Says the Gemara, there's two heterim. Chad mishra oishkai. One is to permit retaining their wages. The chad mishra goizlei, and one is to permit stealing. Now here the Meiri says clearly that this is only a pagan. This is talking about a pagan, which they were unfair to us and they tried to hurt us. Says the Gemara, the tzricha, diashminan zelai, to steal. Mishum Doloi Torach Bey, because there's no proof that he troubled for it. Maybe he got it in Yerusha, maybe he found it, maybe he was given it as a gift. Aval Oishkai, but to withhold wages, the Tarka Bey, where he worked for it, Emalai, I might think it's not allowed. V'yashmin and Oishkai, that's because it never got to his hand. It was never his. Mishum Doloi Asal Yodei. Aval Gazlai, to steal from him, where it came to his hand, I might think it's not allowed. Tzricha. We'll stop over here, Rabbi Isai. Now we're going to do the Mishnah Yaimis.